Hi, I'm Savetz, and this is 20 Things I've Learned While Curating the Digital Library of Amateur Radio and Communications. I am the curator of the Internet Archive's Digital Library of Amateur Radio and Communications. DLARC is a project of the Internet Archive. That's the nonprofit online library best known for the Wayback Machine. DLARC is growing to be a massive online library for the past and present of amateur radio and related communications. It's funded by a grant from ARDC, Amateur Radio Digital Communications. You can find what we have so far at archive.org/details/DLARC. So I've been doing this job for about 6 months now, and I've learned a lot of things along the way, and I thought I'd share some of them with you. Here's the top 20 things that I've learned. Number 20, I learned about Marshall H. Ensor. He lived from 1899 to 1970. QST Magazine was looking for experienced ham radio operators to use their own equipment to send teaching information about Morse code and other technical information that was necessary to become licensed ham radio operators. And beginning in December of 1929, Marshall H. Ensor started doing 60 nightly 1-hour lessons on a frequency just at the top of the popular broadcast segment of household radios. Every evening, he went on the air and used his call sign W9BSP to teach listeners about Morse code and other ham radio topics, and it's estimated he helped more than 10,000 listeners become proficient ham radio operators. I learned about the Ensor Park and Museum, which is located in Olathe, Kansas, near the southern edge of the Kansas City metro area. The folks at the museum have submitted many items about Mr. Ensor's life to the DLARC library, including his master's thesis called Teaching Radio by Radio. You can read the whole thing online right now. Number 19, I learned about Hap Holly's Rain Report and Rain Hamcast. Hap Holly, KC9RP, is a blind ham, and he produced a radio program called the RP Report from 1985 to about 1992. That transitioned to something called the Rain Report, Radio Amateur Information Network, from about 1992 to 2019. Both programs aired news and interviews relevant to the amateur radio community. Thanks to Hap's generous help, 1,300 episodes of the RP Report and Rain Report are available in the DLARC archive, and about 90 episodes of the Rain Hamcast, which he is still producing. All of these episodes includes amazing interviews and history of the hobby and information that cannot be found anywhere else. He has done some amazing work. Number 18, I learned that in 1944, you do not mess with the janitor at the Milwaukee Public Museum lest you receive a passive-aggressive letter from the management. Dear Sir, our friend the museum janitor informs us that we will have to get a few more ashtrays for the use of your members at the meetings. He tells me that the cigarette butts and pipe ashes make stains on the floor that are difficult to remove. Since ashtrays are cheaper than floor surfacing, I believe that his point is well taken, and I am accordingly getting a few more ashtrays and instructing the janitors to see that they are made available to you. Please extend to your members our invitation to make good use of the trays for your convenience and comfort at the meetings, not as souvenirs. This letter is part of a massive trove of documents that have been submitted to the library by the Milwaukee Radio Amateur Club, and we'll hear from them again in a little while. Number 17, I learned that TAPR has been holding meetings and conferences for more than 40 years. TAPR, which used to stand for Tucson Amateur Packet Radio, but today just is called TAPR because the organization is much broader than Packet Radio now, has been holding these conferences, including the Digital Communications Conference, and before that, the Computer Networking Conference, and others. And all of their papers and presentations going back to 1981 are available in the DLARC archive. There is some amazing stuff there. Number 16, I learned that some things never change. Here is essentially the same magazine cover, 42 years apart, one in Radio and Television News, August 1950, and one in Radio Electronics, August 1992. I guess love of the ocean and radios is timeless. Number 15, I learned that Ham Club newsletters come from all around the world. I mean, I kind of knew that already, but actually seeing and collecting newsletters from countries around the world shows the vastness of the hobby. And just some of the newsletters in the library currently include newsletters from Malta, the Telford and District UK Amateur Radio Society, the Netherlands, Canada, and the Northeast Victoria Amateur Radio Club based in Australia. If your club wants to get its newsletters in the archive, contact me and we will make it happen. If they are already in digital format, that's easy. And if they're only on paper, maybe it's older stuff that has never been digitized, we can borrow them and we can scan them and get them online at no cost to your club at all. Number 14, I learned about Glenn Hauser's DX Listening Digest. It started as something called the Shortwave/DX Report, published in 1999, and he renamed it the DX Listening Digest, and it ran from 2000 all the way through 2019. 20 years of news and notes about shortwave listening, pirate radio, the radio industry, controversies, fascinating contemporary accounts of the radio world as it happened. Glenn took a break from that, and then in 2020 started publishing Hauser Log, which is similar, but shorter reports of what's on the air, and he continues to publish those every week. Number 13, maybe you knew this, but I just learned that amateur radio was suspended during World War II. This is another amazing document from the Milwaukee Amateur Radio Club archives. To all radio amateurs, all amateur licenses are hereby notified under Order Number 87 that FCC has ordered the immediate suspension of all amateur radio operation in the United States and its territories, and possessions stop. However, in instances where amateur operation is deemed to be required in connection with the national defense, appropriate authorization will be issued, but only upon application by a duly authorized federal, state, or local official made to the Defense and Communications Board. Stop. Number 12, I learned that there are several Mastodon instances devoted to ham radio. If you are interested in social media, you might want to join the servers of mastodon.radio, which is based in the UK, or mastodon.hams.social, which is in the United States. And there's even more. Those seem to be the two big ones, but there are even more which are listed at fediverse.radio. The DLARC library has an account. It's at DLARC@mastodon.radio. You're welcome to follow us because I toot out new information that we add to the library as we do it. Number 11, I learned about the ARDC, Amateur Radio Digital Communications. This is a private foundation that gives grants and scholarships in support of amateur radio. In 2022 alone, they gave 101 grants, distributing $8 million. This group's grant to the Internet Archive is why the Digital Library of Amateur Radio and Communications exists. Number 10, I learned that there are a lot of ham radio podcasts, a lot of great ham radio podcasts. I've gotten the okay to archive many of the current ones in the DLARC library, including the QSO Today podcast, Linux in the Ham Shack, This Week in Amateur Radio, Solder Smoke. There are many, many others. But podcasts come and go. Some publish for years before stopping, and others publish just a handful of episodes, sometimes even just one or two. But they're still all worth preserving, and they're in the DLARC library in a subsection just for podcasts. Number 9. I learned that Wayne Green, the founder of 73 Magazine, donated a full run of the magazine to Internet Archive before he died. They are all digitized and they're all available to read online in their full glory. Any early issues of QST and Electronics and Wireless World and RCA Review, which was a technical journal that published research and developments in the field of radio communications and electronic technology, and Popular Electronics, and many other magazines and journals and periodicals which you can check out and read. Number 8, I learned that some things never change. Part 2. Here's a one-panel newspaper cartoon called Side Glances from 1940. It shows two fancy women walking together out for a night on the town in their hats and their furs and things. And one of them says to the other, "I wouldn't marry him for $1,000,000. He's an amateur radio fiend and sits up all night to hear somebody tell him it's raining in Tuscaloosa." Number 7, I rediscovered, we'll say, that old ham radio catalogs are fun. The DLARC library has many issues of Ham Radio Outlet and C. Crane catalogs. I went to both of these companies and I asked them if they had digital versions of their catalogs, and they sent me everything they had. So that was very generous of them. And so you can read many of Ham Radio Outlet and C. Crane catalogs online. Reminisce about what your radio cost when it first came out. Right now I have more Ham Radio Outlet catalogs in the pipeline waiting to be scanned, and maybe 1 or 2 AES, Amateur Electronic Supply catalogs. I really want more of those. I'd like to have a much broader collection of those. If you have old AES catalogs sitting around that you'd like to donate, we'd love to scan them and get them online. Number 6. This one may be too inside baseball. Bear with me for a second. GNU Parallel is better than a for loop. So I upload a lot of things using Internet Archive's command line tool. And I know that when you upload something with a for loop in Linux, it does it one at a time. Does one, finishes it, moves on to the next. And that's fine, but can be slow. There's a very useful tool called GNU Parallel, which can do several things at the same time, depending on how much bandwidth you have or how many CPU cores you have. So the bottom command here will upload 8 things at the same time as opposed to one at a time. And as each of those 8 things finish, it will continue on and find more things to upload. This tool is also particularly useful if you are, say, zipping a lot of folders of files. You need to compress those files, but your little zip program might only use 1 core of your computer. So you can use GNU Parallel to say, I want to zip up 8 files at the same time. And then your computer will go to work and compress like crazy and get the work done faster. Number 5, I learned about the Ham Study app. This is not an advertisement, I am just a fan. I got my novice ticket in 1989 and upgraded to tech and then general in the next couple of years. And I have since learned that the tools available to study for our amateur radio tests have improved quite a bit from those thick books that I used to get from Radio Shack. I used the Ham Study app last year to learn what I needed to know to pass the amateur extra test. I just loved how it was able to drill me on the things I didn't know and then wouldn't quiz me so much on the things that I was confident about. I don't think I would have passed the extra exam with such a high score without this very useful tool. Number 4, I learned a technique to reduce the peak to average ratio PAPR in OFDM MIMO systems. No, I didn't. I have no idea what that means. But whenever there's a paper like this that I really don't understand, but I think is interesting to a certain subject of ham radio operators, I put them in the DLARC technical papers section. There are many documents in there from journals and things and PhD theses about antennas and reduction of interference and enhancing bandwidth that are well beyond my pay grade, but I think they might be useful to some of you. But something I do understand is number 3, You Can't Make Love by Wireless, a song by George Grossmith and P.G. Woodhouse, 1923. You can't make love by wireless. It's like bread without the jam. There's nothing girls desire less than a cold macarnagram. Or it's something you can't speak to, from a someone you can't see. It's like a village church that's spireless, or a little home that's fireless, or a motor car that's tireless, or a selfridge that's bireless. I don't know what a selfridge is. And it isn't any good to me. Words to live by 100 years later. Number 2. As I record this, there are 60,000 items in the DLARC library, and I'm adding more every week. But I've learned for as much material as I have found, much is missing, either for now or maybe forever. For instance, Amateur Radio Newsline is a weekly audio bulletin of interest to radio amateurs. It's been publishing since September 1977. It includes a ton of historical ham radio news and controversies and headlines. I have found just about every episode since February 3rd, 2012 through the present, plus the text of about 125 editions from 1992 to 1996 that I was able to scavenge from ye old internet times. But the scripts and audio for about 1,800 episodes are gone. They're just lost to the ravages of hard drive failures and servers that go down, and or they just weren't preserved in the first place. And I hope we can find them, but we may never. If you have the audio or the scripts for Newsline pre-episode 1799 in any format, I don't care if it's digital or PDF or reel-to-reel, please reach out. And the number one thing I've learned, I'm relearning, I'm rediscovering every day I do this job, is that ham radio operators are generous with their knowledge. It makes my job easy and pleasant. The ham radio community is generous, happy to share their knowledge with others to help other people in the hobby. I knew this in 1989 when I first got my license, and the local Elmers set me up with a J-pole antenna and built a cable for me so I could connect my TNC to my little radio. Hams have always been generous, and I get to rediscover that all the time doing this job. If you would like to generously help with this project, I am looking for two things broadly. One, if you have created amateur radio content that you would like to be in the library, for instance, newsletters, podcasts, articles, logbooks, let me know and we will get it included. The other thing, if you have ham radio content that you no longer need and you want to donate to the Internet Archive, for instance, books and magazines and catalogs, newsletters, that sort of thing, we will scan them and keep them and put them online and make them available to the world. So that's it. That's 20 things I have learned so far as the curator of the Digital Library of Amateur Radio and Communications. Thank you very much.